In Hamnet, one of the most nominated films at the Oscars this year, the story isn't just in the script, it's in every detail, every shadow, and every frame.
Production design is an opportunity to storytell without words.
Hamnet's production designer, Fiona Crombie, built Shakespeare's globe from raw wood on a studio backlot and grew entire gardens on a sheet of tarmac.
I wanted it to feel so intimate and so grounded so that you felt like you were right up with those characters in their life.
Today, she brings us behind the scenes of the film Hamnet, inside her process of translating script into texture, color, and space.
I always felt really strongly about this idea of these kind of black holes. I wanted the house to have a sense that, you know, what's happening at the end of a corridor or what's happening at the top of the stairs.
But sometimes the best design is discovered, not planned.
We didn't plan on finding that tree. Like, that tree with the hole was a discovery that then, of course, took on more and more meaning.
Fiona Crombie, welcome to Design Better.
Thank you.
I want to start just with a disclaimer for any listeners who have not yet seen Hamnet, which you're nominated for an Oscar for. There will probably be some spoilers in our conversation. So if you haven't seen it, be warned.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful film. We want to dive into the specifics of the experience of working on that film. But maybe for our listeners who might not be very familiar with what a production designer does, could you walk us through the role and the type of work that you do?
Yeah. So production design is really creating, in really simple kind of basic terms, it's everything that is in a frame. So within like every frame of film that is not a costume. And is not, so a production designer is looking at landscape or architecture, or I'm looking at a tablecloth, I'm looking at the knives and spoons, I'm looking, so basically the big broad picture and then the detail. And obviously there's a bunch of people that you work with to achieve that. But really, I think for me, production design is an opportunity to storytell without words. And so it's looking at, ways to illustrate elements of the story or the characters' lives visually, really. Yeah.
It's a very broad scope. Maybe could you talk a little bit about the skills? Because, you've got to understand history, certainly with this film. There's a ton of history. Objects, what's historically accurate and appropriate. But then there's also a lot of kind of having an artistic eye, so thinking like a DP, a director of photography, a cinematographer, being able to combine all those things into that vision that the director has set forward. What are the skills, like the background that production designers usually have?
It's actually quite varied. A lot of production designers come up through art department. In my case, I was a theatre designer. And so for me, it was always very much about a text, like learning to design through looking, reading plays and thinking about theatre and actually thinking about articulating design in a black box. And I think the skills are, obviously you have to have an imagination. And in my case, it's very much about like a relationship with words. So words will prompt me to imagine or to kind of have a sense of like what I think something should feel like or look like. And it's not crystal clear. It's just like a very sort of sketchy response. And then it's like there's a process of like refining and you sort of end up with something that you're standing in. But it starts with just sort of impulse. And so actually, I think one of the key skills that you need as a production designer is your ability to communicate, because you're taking something that is amorphous, sort of just somewhere in your mind, and then ultimately speaking to people who have to realize that, painters, art directors, set decorators, and bring it to fruition. But meanwhile, interpreting a director's vision. And then it's also really practical because you're worrying quite a lot about money, like budgets. You're worrying about schedules. You're worrying about practical, like, practical things like how will you build that thing that you have in your mind? Like, so there's kind of like, what is the engineering, so it's kind of this dual role that is both really, really creative, but also has to have a practical aspect to it as well.
So at what point in the process do you come on board? And this particular film, Hamnet, is a collaboration, as we understand it, between the writer, Maggie O'Farrell, and the director, Chloe Zhao. And talk to us about when you came in and how you were involved in the early stages of the film.
From memory, and it sort of varies, but I tend to come on quite early. So I will be one of the first hires usually. So after there's a script and there's, it's good to go. Sometimes I'm not, sometimes I'm on before it's actually green lit and we're doing some degree of development. Because again, like this practical aspect, it's like to some extent, design can help with the viability of a film, like how you're going to achieve a film. And so speaking to a designer will help you, like producers, realize what it's going to cost. Or, is it a film that is location based? Is it a film that is going to be built on a studio? And all those things are worked out quite early and help with the methodology of the shoot. And so in the case of Hamnet, from memory, I came on maybe like February or March and we finished.
This is 2024.
Yeah, 2024.
I'd love to just kind of go into your mind or the moment where you just got acquainted with the project. Is it the script is already written, or in this case, did you read the book first? What I'm curious to hear is like where you first touch the story and what you start to see in your mind.
I had read the book and I'd read it just because I'd heard about it. And so that was some years ago. And then I'd heard on the grapevine, like we all do, that Chloe Zhao was coming to make this film. And I was like, oh yeah, but I actually wasn't available. So I sort of didn't think much. I remember thinking like, lucky for some. And then the timing worked out and I read the script and I read it. It was such a great read. Like I read it so quickly. And had a very, very strong response to it, and just had it, just really, honestly, just came to me very, very quickly, the sort of textures and the things that I wanted to explore with the architecture. And very much I was connected to the sense of having an opportunity to talk about a family and make a period film of this sort of era that is really a domestic, like it's about a family and you're getting close to a family in a way that I don't know that I've seen before. And so I was just really drawn to it. I found it obviously really moving. But the script that we had at that point really evolved through the process. So I remember saying, I hope they don't change one word, but inevitably with Chloe's process, there were, many changes and, for the better, like to create this film that is very much about this group of people that came together to make it, so it's not just an adaptation of the book. It's like an interpretation of the book. Yeah. So it was a very quick, very immediate connection for me. And then I met Chloe on Zoom and she had seen reference images that I put together and she felt like my images were articulating the film that she wanted to make. So it was a really quick process in terms of connecting and then just starting. And we sort of didn't need to then go back and forth a lot. It was sort of there in terms of like a core sort of visual structure. And then it just got into a process of like refining, finding the best version of what we were trying to get at.
Can you say more about that part, the reference images? Where do those images come from and how are they presented to Chloe?
Oh, I love a PDF. Like I'll do it.
Okay.
I think PDFs are one of my strong. I can lay up a keynote beautifully. And, they're a collection of like drawings, paintings, photography. Yeah, just things that I think are telling something, like telling me, so therefore anybody, something about the story often the way that I try to do it is I do a sort of a loose map. Like I think about how the film will start and how it will finish, and sort of almost like episodically through the structure of the film. And I'll try to find, so I can look at the journey just in a really sketchy way in these images. And I find that and they're very much about initial impulse. So almost always I can see the palette of the film quite quickly from what I'm drawn to immediately. And yeah, shapes, just things that I'm just drawn to. I just collecting. And then it will, it's kind of, for me, I think some designers really don't like doing this because they feel like it's sort of almost too prescriptive, like it's saying to a director, this is my vision. And, designers we're all malleable. Like you can keep, responding to a director. But in my case, I like doing it because I feel like it gives me a foundation for the film. So I start in a place and then we go ahead. Yeah.
Maybe you talk to us a little bit more about the early artifacts. And if we're talking about product design, we often may start with sketches and then we'll do wireframes for a digital product. And if we're working on a physical product, it might evolve into like foam prototypes or foam models. Maybe it could even be from earlier in the process as you're working your way up the fidelity. You mentioned collecting things, and then how does that evolve into maybe models or other higher fidelity things before it actually becomes a finished sort of product that you see in the movie?
Yeah, well, we're the same. I mean, it's very much about, like, I'll always have a collection of images that I think speak to the set. So it could be like textures or proportions or colors and then there's drawings and we start drawing. Sometimes it's hand drawings. More often than not, it's on the computer. I don't do it. I have people who are, amazing who sit there and do it and I'll be guiding them. And then we do build models, so not just like, digital models, but which are super useful because in the case of this film, we spent a lot of time with the cinematographer, Zhao. He sat and worked out frames and camera positions. And we really, created the house, really molded it, for thinking about camera and thinking about depth and how to capitalize on what is actually it's not a small structure, but it's an intimate structure. But we'll also build white card models. I think they're so useful. And we built the house white card model, the globe white card, all of the set builds were white card models. And, some directors will read a plan, and because obviously we do big, plans as well, drawings, technical drawings. And some directors can read a plan, some directors can't. So we will sort of come at it in different ways. But there's a lot of, capturing screen grabs from models, like showing your angles so that everybody understands. Yeah.
Are you, when you're not engaged in working on a film, are you collecting stuff all the time, like on your computer, on your phone? If we opened up your Photos app, would it just be like a bajillion photos of interesting items? Yeah,
but really badly framed. So when I go through my photos and actually my Hamnet collection, it's like a corner, or it's like some little detail. Like I remember there was like this kind of mitered edges of floorboards, and of course I'm like snapping those. And then someone will say to me, "Have you got a photo of the location?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I would." And then I don't, because I'm too busy like doing some like little engraving that's in the corner somewhere. So yes, and I do that all the time.
Do you feel that the sort of authenticity and detail that you put into the set affects the actor's performance? And I think about something I heard, I think it was on Mad Men, where the production design was so detailed that even inside drawers that you never saw on camera, they would have objects in there that you might find in that setting in an advertising office. And I imagine it just helps build the world for the characters that are performing in it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the great pleasures, I think, when you can do that. And I love handing the set over, to the shoot crew and to the actors, and seeing them just take it on and inhabit it and suddenly look like they've lived there forever. I think that there would be nothing more awful than actually, this happened to me in theatre. This thing happened where we had to build, like it was a kitchen or something, and the doors were not practical. Like there was no action for the actress to go to this cupboard, and she went to the cupboard and she could not open the cupboard, and she went crazy. And that's never happened again. So like, you know, things are practical. There's things in the drawers, and but the big thing is like, obviously we're all there to make an amazing movie, and if we can do that by giving that support with the design, then absolutely that's what we're going to do.
What makes someone's work a work of art?
Art takes countless ideas.
Obsession over the finest details.
And endless tweaks.
Art inspires fresh thinking and new perspectives. It moves people and sets trends in motion.
And what makes an artist?
It's that one final act. The moment you say,
I made this.
That's why Wix Studio is making space for web creators to add a unique signature so you can own what you create. Make your mark. Sign your work on Wix Studio.
I was struck by the rawness, of the story, the film, the emotion. That was a word that just kept coming to mind when I was watching it. When I think of films, these Hollywood representations of this time period, they're very like polished, and it's a different time, but yet it still feels like now. Yeah. These are like muddy roads. These are like, it looks like hard living, even though it's a lovely, charming Tudor structure. But this is kind of, there's a rawness to the settings. Mm-hmm. And that is also the tone or the feel of the script. Can you talk about the conversations that you had with Chloe about how she wanted the film to feel and the creative decisions you had to make to bring that to life?
Well, Chloe's intention at the very beginning was always to build the globe. And that was, you know, for practical reasons. We always knew we were building that theatre, but she really wanted to shoot the rest of the film on location. And that was because she's like allergic to artifice. Like she just wants to have, she's a person who really values authenticity. And I think she was really afraid that we would make something that just looked twee or fake or, you know. So it wasn't a conversation at the beginning. It was, we're building the globe and we're going to shoot on location. And then we went through a process of looking at, I don't know, countless houses where I was taking all these little photos the whole time. After weeks of looking, we arrived at the realization that we had to build the Henley Street house, the attic, the London apartment, like the, you know, and obviously the globe as well. And we were going to build it on a backlot. In many ways, that process of going and looking and standing in spaces and talking about what we wanted it to be like was a great foundation for being able to design the house, like design the sets, because we'd seen like really clearly what we knew we needed to aim for. And also we had the farm, and the farm is a location. And when you have, my favorite kind of work is when you get to do both. So you've got locations and you've got set builds and you're calibrating. And so you're always referring back from one to the other and making sure that you're making a film that hangs together visually. And so, yeah, it just really became a case of like, looking at like having this sort of like record of all the places that we visited and paying attention and, you know, looking out and keeping our eyes open for all the details that then we could bring into the set build. Yeah.
One of the other things that struck me about the film was how the forest almost became a character, the forest and the cave. And some of it reminded me, it wasn't as composed, but reminded me a little bit of the artist Andy Goldsworthy. I don't know if you're familiar with him, a British artist who does these amazing landscape works. Where did you take inspiration for that? How much of the sort of natural parts of the landscape were, you know, kind of tailored to kind of fit the symbolism of those parts of the film?
Well, what was amazing was the first place that we went to find was the forest. And so, in fact, the first time I met Chloe in person was at that forest, in a car park, and we were going off, embarking on this journey together. And we didn't plan on finding that tree. Like, that tree with the hole was a discovery that then, of course, took on more and more meaning through the course of our pre-production. We built into it. So we added, root systems, and we added, we added all the ferns and did a whole lot of greens work. The whole way through the film, we just did tons of greens work. So we sort of I'd say bumped it up, but actually that tree was there, and we found the tree, which is amazing. It's like a needle in a haystack, to find that tree in that forest. The forest is a private estate. So, it's not something that people can go to. And then it just felt like we wanted to create this sort of nest where she would give birth, and where would a place that she would gravitate towards, where she could, she had her secret world as well. Like, we hid objects in the roots, and we did all of that, and just, it's her domain there. And yeah, it was just something that, it just evolved. And then, of course, took on more and more meaning the whole way through. I always felt really strongly about this idea of these kind of black holes. I wanted the house to have a sense that, what's happening at the end of a corridor, or what's happening at the top of the stairs, the idea of death, and this just peering out at you at any given moment was something that I felt really strongly about, that I wanted to put into the film at all times. And then the whole presented itself and became more and more important as we went along.
That shape, and the shot, there's an overhead shot of her laying in that, what you call a nest. I read it as a yonic shape, sort of like she's giving birth. And there's this connection to her mom, who was like the witch in the woods, but she's a woman who's sort of carrying on this naturalist tradition of herbs and so forth. It's almost like that's her mom holding her while she's becoming a mom. It's just, it felt really layered.
Yeah. And you know what? You don't really see it in the film, but we actually brought in a rowan tree because her mother is rowan. And we brought in a fully grown rowan tree and it's just out of frame. There's some shots where I can see it because I know it's there. But exactly what you're saying is, it is very much about that connection to her mother in that place. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciated that I got to the end of the film and I was thinking about the relationship that she had with her husband, who's William Shakespeare. I'm curious why his name is not said until the end of the film. Was there some meaning there that? I don't know, other than my take on it was so that it was a story about two people and a family, and it wasn't overshadowed by the great William Shakespeare. He was just a father and a husband and a son, and too. That was my take on it. Yeah. Yeah. Even in the subtitles, it does not name him, which I found very interesting. But he's sort of this eccentric guy who's trying to, just make his way in life. And she's a very eccentric person. And they sort of align in an interesting way. I appreciated that there's a lot that was communicated without it being literally communicated, that here are these two eccentric people that come together and they find something common in themselves. The settings, like where she's giving birth, that she's out in the woods and so forth, we kind of understand a lot about her character just with the spaces that she inhabits.
Yeah, and I think it was important to always think about them as companions, and that doesn't mean that they're matching. It can mean that they are finishing each other in a way at some point in their lives. In many ways it was, she is of the earth, he is of the air. He was in the pale blue gray, she is in the earthy kind of reds and, bodily kind of colors. And for me, he is about structure, like he, you know, a 3-act structure, iambic pentameter, so physical structure, like he has architecture around him. She is
Those
out
great
in the
vests.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like, where can I buy that? That was great.
I can hook you up with Malgosia, no worries. But yeah, so it's like they sort of are different, but they complement each other, and crucially, they see each other. And I think, one of the things that I find incredibly beautiful, and actually, like, I don't think I'd seen, it was certainly not in a period film, was this idea of somebody saying, go away so you can reach your potential. Like a partner saying that, like, you know, I recognize that you have something else somewhere else, and I give you permission to go away. It was something that, you know, I mean, in my life, you know, it was kind of meaningful. Like I was like, wow, you know, so that felt like contemporary, you know, something that I just thought this is, yeah, something everybody can relate to, is like having to like allow your partner to reach their potential.
Could you talk a little bit about how you think about balancing historical accuracy versus creating the right tone and an emotion on a set? And I'm thinking specifically about the Globe, which you created, as I understand it, at a sort of smaller scale, but also created this very haunting and beautiful backdrop, a painted backdrop of a forest, which also, as I understand, they didn't do that back then for plays. So yeah, talk a little bit about that tension between wanting to make a, you know, more or less accurate film, but then bringing in elements that might be ahistorical.
I think I learned very early on. The first period film I did was Macbeth, actually. So that was Justin Cazell's film that had Michael Fassbender and Marion Cotillard in it. And it was set in 11th century Scotland. And, you know, I got the job. I was living still in Australia, and we were going to be, you know, he's an Australian director. So we were like, we have to get this right. Like, well, let's be so diligent. I did all the research. I understood 11th century Scotland, like inside out, and we had no money. So there was absolutely no way from the start that we could be historically accurate with that film. And what we had to do and work out was a way to evoke the period and to have the audience believe that you were there and believe that, not be taken out of the film, but also for it to have a kind of an atmosphere and for it to feel like, you know, informative of the story and the emotions and everything. And so, I don't know, I worked out from that film what was important, which is, I think it's very, very important to understand what you should be doing, like to understand how it should be. And then you can make informed departures. Like you work out what is important and what is not important. And it's just, I don't know. I don't even think it's that big a badge of honor. Like when people go, oh, it's so historically accurate. I just sort of think, no, I mean, to me, it's like, does it feel like it's informing or elevating? Are you helping the storytelling? Are you like, that is for me what my job is. And so, but the most important thing is I don't take you out of the film. Like there's no moment where you go, I don't believe this, or,
right.
You know, like that is such a fine line, like the delicacy. And with something like Hamnet, I really, you know, and I made The Favourite. Like, so The Favourite is like almost like the opposite, where actually it was designed to have everyone go, wow, how beautiful. Look at all the flowers. Look at the tapestries. Look at, it's so much gold everywhere. Hamnet was the opposite for me. It was like, I wanted it to feel so intimate and so grounded and so authentic. So that you felt like you were right up with those characters in their life. And then with something like the Globe, yeah, the important thing for me was like what is on the stage. I loved building the Globe and doing our version, which was with all the raw wood and very, very sort of, kind of in a way, naive architecture, like really simple, because the thing that your eye is drawn to and the jewel and the thing that is striking is the backcloth. And that backcloth just became so essential to the link in the story and, you know, just, And so, that we just took liberties, but it feels right,
I loved seeing the backstage, off to the side. That was interesting, curious to see what sort of tools and stuff they'd have back there.
Yeah, well, but a lot of that is accurate. This is the thing. We sort of walk this line. Like, there was loads of research done. I mean, the glove making is another example, actually. The glove making workshop was meticulously researched. And we made a lot of the details that you see in that glove making workshop. And it was the same with the globe. So there was a lot of research done. And my set decorator, Alice Felton, she actually dressed the backstage with all props from all the plays that preceded Hamlet. So because it was a repertory company, at any given moment, in theory, they can just put on, A Midsummer Night's Dream or whatever it is. And so we had all these props there. We had the area where there were the swords, we had the daggers, we had the, you name it, like and also they had beautiful makeup stations where they had the oyster shells with all the colors in them. It was beautiful. It was very beautifully done.
Wix Studio and Pantone present the Color of the Year Web Capsule, a collection of web design assets curated in the rich tones of Mocha Mousse. Pre-designed for creative momentum, customizable for creative freedom. Craft your next project in the color of now. Exclusively on Wix Studio.
Tell us more about the research process. I assume that's sort of a multifaceted thing, that there's some things you can research from the comfort of your home on a computer and some things you just have to go into the world to learn about.
Actually, for me, the greatest resource was the book. It's so detailed, and Maggie O'Farrell did incredible research herself and actually grew the gardens that we talk about, that are in the book. And then we grew our own gardens. But she became a beekeeper. She had learned how to deal with a bird. Like, she actually did all of these things. And so then she put them into the book. And so I reread the book, underlining it and transcribed all the notes for myself, because her descriptions of daily life were incredible and they really informed our approach. And then obviously you can look at information about the globe. That was pretty sketchy. We didn't, there was a lot of information about proportion. There was a lot of information about how they put on plays, for sure. Less information about exactly what the interior, no illustrations. But then maybe I was avoiding them. They may be there, but I didn't go hard to find them because I wanted to do our version. But yeah, you can certainly read about how people lived. And the greatest resource for me was walking around and going to see the real places. I mean, Henley Street House exists. And so you can go and walk that house. You can go to the Hathaway Farm. And there are elements of those places that are in the film that I was really, inspired by. Yeah.
So a lot of our designers, especially who are working at larger companies that have big products and big teams at scale, might use a design system or a brand and style guide just to make sure there's consistency in the product and the colors and typefaces and things like that. Is there anything similar in your work where you might have some kind of style guide to make sure that the people across the production team know we're working with this palette and other constraints like that?
That is always my initial pass of images, actually, almost always. And then I'll flesh that out more. But I really like starting a film with a really strong body of images that, for me, tell the narrative, the visual narrative, and then I'll put it up in the art department. And I do feel like it's a mission statement. I do feel like that's, I have this idea, I don't know if it's true, if it works, that anybody who walked in on day one or, on their day one starting the job could get a measure of the film and what we're trying to aim for through those images. That is very important to me, setting that up. Yeah.
So this project was unique in that Maggie O'Farrell not only wrote the book, but then she co-wrote the script with Chloe. And I presume she was probably on set for a lot of things, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was. She was there, and she was there in pre-production as well. So she was definitely a big part of the process. And she also made herself available to us. You know, she just said anything you need, anytime. And she definitely fed into set decoration. I know that Alice was in touch with her quite a lot about details. Yeah.
Are there any stories you could share about how Maggie might have come in and said, like, oh, wait a second, we're headed in the wrong direction. It actually would have been more like this?
No. No, it was the opposite. Do you know what was great? And I know that she has said this, but at the time, she was sort of overwhelmed, you know, because suddenly, I mean, it must be wild to have something in your mind that you put on a page, and then like I rock up and, you know, and do my thing, and I do my interpretation, and Chloe, it's like the actors, you know, they're doing their interpretation. I'm doing the interpretation of the environments. But she said it all offers, like, it's almost like it's their companion pieces. Like her book is one thing, and then the film is another. And she was really struck by what we did, actually. Like, you know, I don't know that she'd been on other film sets, but she was really struck by the level of detail, and I think the level of care. You know, I think every single person that was on that film set loved this process and loved this project. So there was so much care from everybody. You know, like I said, we grew all the gardens. I mean, it was like a tarmac, and then we turned it into the gardens that you see in the film. And I think she was just like blown away by things like having a pear tree suddenly in a back garden, you know, and bees flying around, and you're actually in a back lot of a studio, you know.
Could you talk a little bit more about your relationship with a cinematographer? I'm not going to pronounce his name because I'll probably mess it up, but we've had other cinematographers on the show, like Autumn Durald Arkapaw, who's actually nominated now for Sinners this year. And, you know, they have a specific sort of set of talents, and I think one of those talents is collaborating with the other facets of the team. What does that collaboration look like for you?
Well, I'd met Lukasz in passing some years before. And then, like, one of the great things about when we start a project is you go scouting. So you're in the back of the van, and it is a little bit like, I don't know, like you have these intense getting to know you. Like you're in the van for hours on end, you just suddenly start talking and getting to know each other. And like immediately we just clicked. And we went scouting together, and yeah, we had this process of like going around looking for these locations, and through that process, really identifying what we believed with Chloe, of course, like what we were looking for, what we believed was important in the architecture and in the environment, in the forest. And then when we were building the house, it became a case of sitting together and really refining it for camera. I think what was so interesting for me was watching him, and with Chloe, come up with the camera language for the film, you know, all these sort of very high observed shots. It's very, I mean, they laughed about it at the time, but kind of nervously, that they really didn't do a lot of coverage. You know, there was a real confidence in the way that they shot the film. You know, it was like these big wides, like high wides and these establishes. And then there was no coming in and, you know, cutting amongst faces. It was actually you're wide or you're close. And I think that and I think that's part of the reason why the film has a feeling of difference about it, is the way that it was shot. And for me, obviously, like, it's exciting when anyone wants to do a wide on my sets. You know, it's like, good. But he's a person who is hugely collaborative and a real pleasure to be around, and obviously has an incredible eye. Like his framing is beautiful, his lighting is beautiful. So yeah, I loved working with Lukasz.
You've worked on a lot of different sets, different types of films. This one definitely feels like, I don't know if it's necessarily different than other experiences you've had professionally, but from a viewer's perspective, I felt a lot of everything's firing on all cylinders. Like the score was incredible. The costumes were great. The acting was unbelievable. There's just like so many things that were happening right. And you talked about the feeling of care that Maggie had about the process. And presumably that's like a culture thing, that a director, whoever's producing, they're kind of shaping that. Could you just talk a little bit about creative vibes when it works well and when it doesn't, and like what is it that makes it work well?
One of the really key things I think on this film was that Chloe invited collaboration, and the film was really, in many ways, it was a process of discovery. And she invited us to do that with her and the actors. So when we were scouting with our eyes open. We were looking for whatever we could find, and we offered that to Chloe. There are loads of things in the film that came through that process. So it wasn't just a case of here's a script, realize it, go through a normal process. It was actually understand the material, you find your interpretation. So I was invited to interpret things my way and to offer them up to Chloe. And so it was like this collaboration, this very sort of, communal experience where we were all invited to participate in the making of this film in a way that I haven't actually had before. So with a level of depth, I think. And, so which meant that there was an investment, and that meant I'm talking all sorts of people. So like the people in my department that, some of the most beautiful props that were found were by like an assistant who was out looking, but everybody knew the film we were making and had a sense of what we were looking for. And so everybody could find the gold. It wasn't just, nobody was a functionary. Everybody was invited to bring their best. And I think, a great example of that is the greens work on the film, like the level of detail, and, these gardens were, and were created from nothing, but it was done with such care. It was everywhere. And the atmosphere on the set it was a lot to be around, seeing a film articulate ideas about grief. And, it brought up lots of people. Everybody was sort of like, wow, okay, we're here. And this is bringing, we're experiencing something together. We all knew we were experiencing something together.
I just want to encourage everyone listening to go check out Hamnet. It's a wonderful film, nominated for 8 Oscars, including for production design. So win, lose, or draw, congratulations. It's an incredible accomplishment.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks for being on Design Better.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a good chat.